the storytelling and the creating of the music and the sitting down and having conversations with people invites all of you into the same room. It invites all of you into the same room to say, where did these things come from? Where did these habits come from? And at the end of the day, it's not to dismiss your experience, but just to say you don't have enough time. In this blip of a life that we don't have enough time to let this like hold us down.
You're listening to Artistry with Heart, a musician's wellness podcast. I'm Stephanie Lynn Bernards. Today, we are having a conversation with Professor Coty Raven Morris, an inspirational vocalist, educator, sought-after clinician, artist, speaker, and composer whose fierce advocacy for social justice and empowerment through music is undeniably making the world a better place, one song at a time. Coty is the Assistant Professor of Choir, Music Education, and Social Justice at Portland State University and the founder of Being Human Together, a budding community normalizing difficult topics through music education, conversation, and connection. Coty is a proud alumnus of Texas State University San Marcos and Michigan State University, where she obtained a master's in choral conducting. Her most recent acknowledgments include being a nominee for the Portland State University George C. Hoffman Faculty Award, and she was a finalist for the 2024 Music Educators Grammy and was just named a quarterfinalist for the 2025 Music Educator Grammy. Coty, I'm so honored to have you with me today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it's such a privilege. You are clearly such a light to so many people in this world and such a force for good. So I'm so excited for this conversation.
Let's do it. What are we talking about today?
Well, Coty, from reading a little bit about your history, it sounds like you have always been surrounded by music, from having a grandmother who sang jazz in your family's bar to having an aunt sing in church choir. Can you just tell me more about your earlier years and how your musical journey started?
Yeah, it would be a joy. So I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. And my musical experiences were surrounded by, the family jazz experiences and what we sang at home versus the church experiences and what I got from having a Catholic mom and a Baptist grandmother and an aunt that sang in the church. And my mom passed when I was a kid, when I was 5. And so a lot of my musical experiences and my life experiences were kind of compartmentalized, or as I say, divided into almost like Harry Potter Horcruxes, right? My music and my family experience when I was at church was very different from when I was staying with one family member, which was very different when I was with my grandmother, because our relationship with music was different. Matter of fact, one of my earliest memories, and I say this with 100% love, God rest her soul, to my grandma. I remember the day I ran downstairs after hearing NSYNC's Christmas album.
I love
I loved it. I love it. And I mean, and first, a big fat parentheses, for I was surrounded by good old Southern Baptist music in a Black Baptist church. My grandmother was a jazz singer. Everybody grew up in big band experiences. And my whole family is made up of people who can sing, but say they can't sing. They're like, oh, no, you didn't hear that. You didn't hear that, right? So of all the beautiful musical experiences that I could have been surrounded by in Louisiana, that NSYNC album dropped, and I heard that song, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and I was weeping. I don't know what it was about that, but I was like, I want to be a singer. And I think it was just the joy. Like when I think about it, it doesn't have to be complex. It just had to invoke joy, and it made so many people happy. So I ran downstairs to my grandma and I said, I have to be a singer. I absolutely have to be a singer. And then I don't remember exactly what she said, but I do remember it being the longest rant in opposition to music. Oh. And one of the statements that she would say is, you either sing for Jesus or you sing for the devil. And she did not want me to sing music, because the thing about growing up in a jazz environment in the South, when your family owns the bar, this is a very specific and not a broad generalization, but it did bring alcoholism into the scenario, into part of my family, and that was part of my family story, of this, my grandmother's story. And so I hear her with that, but I just wanted to sing. And I'm also thinking like, look, I'm 8. Like, this is crazy. This is pretty heavy. I'm like, oh, okay. I was just listening to Christmas bops. So I was allowed to sing in church. Right. And if there was a school choir, I would have been allowed to be in school choir, but that was not happening in the public school system at the time in New Orleans. Matter of fact, one of my earliest memories, I went to McDonald 42 Elementary School, which I believe is now a charter academy in New Orleans. And what I recall is when I was in the 3rd grade, this beautiful white woman with long brown hair walked into the room. And I say that because that's what she looks like. My first disclaimer of 500 disclaimers on social justice is that we get shy when we talk about the way people look and give detail. I just need you to understand the story. It was the first person that I ever saw teaching music in school was a brunette white woman. Right. And so I'm like, wow, look at this magical person that's coming to the space to bring music. She has a bottle of rubbing alcohol, a bag of cotton swabs, and a trombone. And she says some words. I don't know what she says, but I'm like, wow. I'm enamored. Then she plays trombone, and then she takes off the mouthpiece, puts the trombone down. She buzzes in the mouthpiece, cleans it, and then we get in a line. I'm not making this up. And then we get in a line, and we all lip buzz. And I received 3 years of fine arts credit that day.
Wow.
I received the other 3 years of fine arts credit when we would have choir for graduation. And at that point, I've been 5'10" since I was 11 years old. So here comes my 6th grade commencement, my 6th grade graduation. I'm towering over the rest of the 6th grade class. They put in some cassette of a graduation song. We learn it by ear because most of us were in church choir and or grew up in homes where people sang or knew how to play an instrument. So we picked up really fast as a community, as a culture. That was part of our culture. But I just remember we were not nailing this cassette tape. And I was in church choir. I was the Mother Mary for the Christmas play. So you're looking at a VIP artist here. And I kept saying in the rehearsal, we're off. And because our tempo was off or we were like ahead of a beat, I would do the same thing in the graduation. All right. So this is my experience, with music to this point through 6th grade. Mm-hmm. And by the time I'm in the 7th grade, I go to, what was it? It was McMain Magnet School. This would be just a few months before my grandmother would pass away and I would find myself moving to Texas. But I signed up, you had 5 elective options. They were going to pick your top 3. And I picked the following in this order. My first was choir. My second was band. I had never played an instrument, but I figured, where do you learn it? If you don't sign up for the thing, you won't learn the thing. So I picked choir, band. I picked Spanish. I knew somehow they were going to put me in PE, if I wasn't in a sport. And then what else is there to take? I don't know. Let's just sign up for advanced English literature. I'm in the 7th grade. And that won't put me in that. They put me in PE, Spanish, and advanced literature. The arts were not being focused upon. That was not something that they were hoping to gear up. And I never even met those music teachers in the time I was there. So I like to say that out of the roses, there are cracks. And please guide me if I've gone too far off the deep end in this question. But, in the same, not all the roses, there are cracks, but the same cracks in the sidewalk where roses can grow, so can weeds. Mm-hmm. And the same spaces where weeds can grow, so can roses. And one does not cancel out the other. It's just the balance that it is to be alive. Mm-hmm. So out of the weed, that was the grief that my grandmother passed, and that was my mother, right? And I do recall moments when I would call her, mom. Out of that move to Texas to live with my mother's brother, to live with my uncle, provided an opportunity for me to live in a state where fine arts was required. Mm-hmm. You had to get a credit in middle school. You had to at least get 1 credit in high school. And yes, we still deal to this day with the balancing act of someone telling kids they can't be involved in all the things, but I was in a place that allowed me to get in the door for music. And considering that 9/11 will be my 8th grade year, I'm so grateful that I had choir as an anchor. I'm so grateful that I had the teachers who paid for me to go to summer camp and told me I was on scholarship, and the scholarship was their generosity. I would grow up to discover, that was their generosity. But I was always, that is all to say, that whether it be my experiences singing in church and the memories that I have of the first time I sang Oh Holy Night, or, that cassette tape, the trombone experience, whether it's watching my own cousin like paint, like those glimpses of art always were like sparkle moments in my brain. And I knew somehow, even when I was still debating well into high school about being a chemist and going into science or going into coding, because I went to coding camp. But those were always things that are like, yes, I'm good at those things. We all need things that don't give us necessarily a paycheck, but it was not the return on investment. Right. It's not the same as what happens when I make music, especially when I make music with other people. Did I answer the question?
Absolutely.
Sweet.
And more. So you talked about, out of the cracks grow weeds or roses, right? And it sounds like the essence is like you have a choice to kind of create.
Yeah.
Even though things happen to us, we have a choice to create one or the other in the moment. Yes. And that's a matter of perspective. You mentioned that there were some troubled times growing up, and it sounds like, obviously losing your mother and then losing your grandmother were catastrophic.
Yeah.
How do you feel like that affected your musical career? And also, how do you feel like it affected like your desire to pursue music as healing? Was that a part of the journey? Or just, I guess I'm curious about the troubled times, because I also had troubled times growing up. Yeah. And I did find a lot has informed how I approach my life now because of it. Yeah. Could you speak to that?
I've been doing a lot of traveling lately, and one of the things that made me enthusiastic about coming to hang out with you today is because it's imperative that we revisit our stories in different seasons of our lives. And I think had I sat down with you right at the end of our academic school year, you may have gotten a different answer from a fatigued version of me versus the Coty that has sat in the woods and gone to summer camp. And summer camp was a place that served as a place of healing for me. I recall a particular moment working at Texas State University. That's where I got my undergrad. And I remember, as my brain is moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour at all times, right? You can
relate to that.
Is it at the summer camp that I was just at? I'm in line at lunch hearing all these teachers talk about, their ADD and their focus. And I'm like, maybe it's just artists. To what extent is it a diagnosis? And to what extent is the ADD and the way that we think just who we are as artists? But I think about being a counselor at a summer camp at Texas State, where, I'm getting pulled into all these different meetings, and I get a phone call like, hey, Coty, we need you to come to the auditorium. And I'm thinking, oh, something's on fire, blah, blah, blah. And one of my colleagues would tell me, actually at this time it's my boss, it would tell me a story of a young man who came to camp, and camp was a place for solace from him. And he had a mother who was a drug addict and was not in contact with this young person for the longest bit of time. And he comes to camp, and he's in this space where he gets to be whoever he wants to be. And that's what camp was for me. In all of that trouble, and all of that grief, my grandma always made a way for me to go to a community camp in New Orleans. It was the first time I was in a pool, was because I got to go to summer camp. Coding camp came from my uncle and aunt, and my going with my cousin to a place at a community college, at Austin Community College. And that's where I learned those skills. And so I realized that camp was a place that brought a multitude of different people together and allowed us to try different things. And you also get to be whoever you want to be. I returned to this young man at this camp now where I'm a counselor, where he's at camp and he's doing the talent show and he's involved in all these things. And his mom contacts him out of nowhere after a series of years of not speaking to him. And he's, of course, enthusiastic, because no matter how much people hurt you, family's family, there's always going to be this tether that brings you back to that best friend from elementary school or middle school, and there's parts of us like caught in time capsules, right, where we just want to heal relationships, to move forward with particular things. Well, unfortunately, in this story, she would promise that she was going to show up to see him in a concert at camp, and she did not show up. So I'm hearing this story, and I'm moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour, and I just kind of want to put a Band-Aid on whatever the situation is and go back to what I'm thinking, to discover that I've been called to the auditorium because my boss, now colleague, said, Coty, you were the only person we could think of that understands perhaps what this kid is going through. And my heart just sank. And it also made me slow down. Like my body went, and I sank in the chair, for a little bit. And I just went up to him, and he said, not only were you the only person, but this was vital. He wanted to talk to you.
Really?
This kid's specifically asked to talk to me because of the glimpses of my life story that I shared, not in let's sit down and trauma dump. I didn't learn that phrase until I was well into adulthood, the idea of trauma dump. It was just my story. The things that have happened to me were just a series of things that happened to me. Now, that is not to negate to the pain, right? One of the reasons why I didn't want to teach middle school for the longest time was like, these kids are weird. Like, they're going through a lot. And the older I got, the more I was like, oh, you don't feel comfortable teaching middle school because you don't remember most of it. You were going through so much. That's when you moved from Louisiana to Texas. And it wasn't just the grief of death. It wasn't just the disconnect from the culture. Let us asterisk here that culture is beyond the color of our skin. That's just where we in these great United States get stuck in our conversation. The culture of being around people, what it is to be in Louisiana, what it is to be in New Orleans, how people greet each other, the language, the talking, the academic structure. But here's the thing, I come full circle on this, these stacking dolls, these Russian stacking dolls of stories that I'm telling you, that about those moments of grief and hardship and the trauma, whatever we want to label it. Here's the thing about growing up, and here's the thing about talking about it and sharing these stories now, is that for years, I would safely say 20, 30 years, as I'm 36, what the pandemic did for me is it allowed me to slow down enough to also see some other perspectives of my own pain. That yes, I was 12 and I lost my mother and my grandmother. And we're dealing with the cultural shifts that did come back to elements of my skin color when I was in Texas, and what that meant, there amongst ignorant kids. Yeah. As I too was an ignorant child, right? Ignorance means you just don't know. And teaching teaches what we should know, and how we should practice that. Well, here's the thing. I'm 12 and I lost my grandmother and my mother, but my uncle was younger than me. He was 32, 33 and lost his sister and his mom. And I had to be in my 30s before I could process that. Not only did you lose these women who were so important to you, but then you got a hard-headed 12-year-old. Yeah. Right? And your relationship with music, because you see what it did in your family, or we believe that it's a catalyst. We believe it's a catalyst for these things. Mm-hmm. And you just want me to get a job, and you want me to be sturdy on my feet, because I don't have parents, right? I see your perspective. I see his perspective now on the lens, of my life. I see why he navigated the way that he did. And it rebuilt, it allowed me to love him in the bones that I'm in now, and the body that I'm in now, beyond that hurt. It's the same cracks, right? You don't get to just fill the cracks with more cement and cover it like it doesn't happen. Though I will say there's relationships, I believe we all have relationships where it would just be so much easier if we can just pour the cement on it, but that's not what it is to evolve. Yes. That's not what it is to evolve in this planet. Yes, and to look back and then to tend the soil, to go in and tend the soil and pull those weeds means that you invest something back into that space, and that space can be something where something beautiful can grow, and it just doesn't happen at the rate that we necessarily want it.
I couldn't agree more. I think sometimes our wounding can be our greatest gift if we choose to let it transform us. And that's exactly what you're talking about. But you have to be ready. And I think that whole idea of it's easier to put cement on the wounds, or the relationship, or just, pretend it wasn't there, it didn't happen. That is not how we evolve. That's not how we evolve. And it's not, like you said earlier, it's not trauma dumping just to share your story. You're just stating the facts. And I think sometimes it's important for us to realize that having our stories be heard allows us to take what has hurt us so deeply and transform it into what I consider often to be people's greatest superpower.
Yes. I love that you said that. I have a particular student I was working with this past year who I heard in our conversations together when in his attempt to amplify me and to show his support and his gratitude for what I was bringing to our program, I would often hear these words of like, oh yeah, with your trauma and with your, it's like, wait a minute, hold on. I'm not walking around carrying this as a weight on my back. It's what fortifies my spine. That's very different. That is very different.
Yes. Thank you for saying that.
I think it speaks to like how we talk about mental health, past experiences, how we talk about childhood trauma, how we talk about healing and what it looks like. And I think one of the common threads is this timeline concept that in the grand scheme of things, like our life is our life and we're on this planet, if we're lucky, for 60 plus 70 plus years longer, to share our stories and to go through these cycles. And in the grand scheme of things, we are but a blip.
Yeah,
we are but a blip in the timeline. And so we think, well, if I'm just this blip and I only have this amount of time, why aren't I over it yet? Why haven't I grown through it yet? Or perhaps it's all fine. We Americans we're obsessed with smiling. I'm reading a book right now called Bittersweet that is centered around the chapter I'm on right now is the American obsession with smiling and why we feel that we always have to be happy. And if we're not always happy, what does that say about us? It's not a negative thing.
It's not a psychosis.
It's not a psychosis to like sit with something.
Feel it, man.
Feel it. Actually feel it. I've noticed because people revealed it in me, I am now noticing in other people how quickly we go back and forth, even on the death of a friend or the death of a family member, when someone says like, oh, I lost a person. Then you say, I'm so sorry. And then their auto response is, it's fine. Or it's okay. Damn, that's like programmed in us to dismiss that grief that quickly. I didn't say that we have to like boo-hoo 100% of the time. That's not how grief works. It's going to come in and out of our body as the rising of the tide. It's going to, and you can't control how it happens, but you have to be a vessel that allows for that to come in and out as it needs to be. And you have to have a plan. You have to know yourself enough to know what you do when you have that. And I am grateful that I can say, and I want to share this with the planet, that I'm in my mid-30s, and one of my more recent things I've been sitting with, especially the past 2 years, as I'm doing things with my life that I'm so proud of doing, and I want to share it with people, share these experiences with my students, share these experiences with my friends and my family, that I had this like longing. I felt like a knife in my gut, and I couldn't pinpoint what it was, right? Especially when you're doing things of excellence. It's not all about grief or tragedy. It's about celebration and wanting to share things with people. And I'm like, what is missing? And then suddenly, like an ache in my heart, I was like, oh my God, I wish I had my mom. And I haven't said that to a lot of people, but I was like, that's what I'm missing. I wish I just had my mom to talk to about a couple of these things. I don't say that to make people sad. If it does, roll with it. Roll with it. But I share that to say that is a revelation of how many layers of myself I had to work through and build and heal and tear down and heal again to get to the part where my subconscious said, okay, you're still a human being who longs for a mother. That's a normal human response.
Yes.
The guards that we put up that tell us, as I've had those guards of like, well, if you were to have a father and a mother, Coty, you would have had one. Like if that was you, I've said that to myself to protect myself from that wave of grief, but that's not a healthy response in the situation. But I had to go through that stage though. That's what I needed. And I needed some other things to build themselves and support themselves and tear themselves down to get to that point.
It's funny. I'm also 36 and I had a recent conversation, twinsies, and I was thinking to myself, because for my own pain points and things that we have continued to be, I feel like I have like three thorns in my life that will always hurt. And one of them is and I feel like people say often that, you're meant to learn 3 really important lessons on your ride on this planet, right? And maybe I'm getting the number wrong, but essentially they keep resurfacing in these different ways, right? And the universe or the God or the source, whatever source you believe in, if that's your thing, keeps presenting different challenges for you so that you can essentially keep uncovering the wound that will eventually help transform you. And what I thought was so interesting is I had this thought myself. I'm like, you're 36. Shouldn't you just be over this by now? It's not like this has been different. It's not like this is any different. This is the same thorn you've had in your side since you were 8. It's so interesting because it takes so long for us to finally get to this place where you can say, no, this just hurts. Yeah, this just hurts.
It just hurts.
And that when you can allow yourself to accept that, then you can say, but it also It also can empower me if I just say, hey, look at what I've come from and look at who I am and look at how much more empathy I've gained because of what I've been through. But also, this really hurts and I have to sit with that too, right?
Yeah.
For me to just sit around and say, like, Stephanie, you're 36. So it's not like this is a new story. It's like, that doesn't matter. It's one of my deepest woundings, right? And so, however, that deepest wounding can continue to teach me more about like evolving, which seems to be like a theme that keeps arising.
Yeah.
It's just this idea of how do we take what's presented to us in life and allow it to transform us and evolve us into the best version of our spirits that we can possibly be while we're here on this short ride of life, right?
Yes.
So I love that you said that, like, it's all of these things that come back to us when it's the right time. And honestly, I think they take a lifetime to heal from, but it's not that we're chained by them or to them. It's not like you said earlier, like you're not, when somebody says, oh, your trauma, this, it's like, no, this is actually part of my spine. This is actually part of my heart and my spirit. Mm-hmm. This is a part of my life experience that I have chosen to inform how I approach life, and in a really deep and beautiful, complex way, right? Yeah. I think it is so easy to see someone and just immediately assume that they haven't been through something, or 100%. That they, just because you have an optimistic perspective, well, obviously you probably haven't been through much in your life. Otherwise you'd know, that life's really hard.
I have a poem that I wrote in a very stressful time when my body was just riddled with grief and anger, at a transgression that had happened in a work environment that was like all consuming. Sometimes I stare off into the universe and wonder who I am somewhere else, where I got it all right the first time and I'm all the things that everyone else expects me to be. And though they are but phantoms of desires unquenched and moments unfulfilled, I still ask myself, for all this pain, what was the point? The storytelling and the creating of the music and the sitting down and having conversations with people invites all of you into the same room. It invites all of you into the same room to say, where did these things come from? Where did these habits come from? Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's not to dismiss your experience, but just to say you don't have enough time. In this blip of a life that we don't have enough time to let this like hold us down. Because it will come again, but it did also come for a purpose. So figure out what that you owe it to yourself, yes, and you owe it to your community to figure out what is the root of these things. Mm-hmm. And the booger of it all, new lesson I'm learning, and I'm still sitting with, I'm not gonna crunch about it. We don't learn these things in linear fashion. We don't learn things progressively like a road trip, stop sign to stop sign. I've been thinking of it as of late as if we are the center of our ecosystem, right? If we're the center of our own universe, that there are moments and lessons gravitating around us like moons and stars and rocks and comets. And so we grab these lessons as they come to us, and we don't necessarily grab it in the order that we think we should grab them, but then you grab them when you're ready to receive them.
I love that. That's such a beautiful analogy and just metaphor for exactly what you were talking about. It's so important for people to hear this, especially coming from a performer and a musician. I'm super curious about how everything you just spoke about informs your musicianship, your compositions, your instruction. And can you just speak to how this approach informs your musicianship?
Yeah. So when I'm teaching in my classrooms, whether it's middle school or high school, I have my most teaching experience with high school. And I just wrapped up my third year at the university level, and I love teaching my college students. I like to say that education is my biggest return on investment. When I'm in the classroom, I share with a colleague that all that million miles per hour that I'm talking about, when I teach, I'm all in the same room, right? And I'm like, oh, well, it's super cool. That's why I feel like I can do so many things at the same time. And so this kind of mindset of learning these lessons as they come to you, I feel like my classroom is my community church, where the common denominator is community, the common denominator is love. And I don't say that to be hokey. I say that because love is a verb, so it's an action. Yes. And the action that I am taking is I am picking repertoire that not only teaches them music history, and I can put that at the forefront, right? But in that history, we remember that these composers were just people. They're people that we've put on platforms now. But I think it's very dangerous to tell the story of Mozart and only highlight his strongest hits and the cool powdered wigs and how young he was when he was writing, and not talk about the ego, and not talk about the pressure from his family, and not talk about how he got played. Mozart Requiem is the piece of art where someone literally paid him to play himself while he was dying. Then they stole his art. And then for years, people did not know that Mozart wrote the Requiem. And then his wife went to bat for him after he died. Give me this song back, right? Wow. You know, like, could you imagine? There's a world where someone was tripping around pretending to be Mozart. We can't imagine that. Right. But that's because we put this person on a pedestal, that we forget that they're a person, and that people get ripped off. Right. And people get tricked, right. And people cheat, and people lie, and people love, and people grow, and people, right? Like that's all the same things. Art has always been a way that I was able to express myself and connect with other people. And just this past weekend at the International Gala Festival, the Community Choir Festival, lots of choirs of different demographics and cultures, predominantly a lot of groups of the LGBT community, sang at this festival in Minneapolis. And there were two pieces in that concert that, in that entire international festival, that featured my text. I was watching their set where they closed with a song by Brandon Ulrich called What Grows, which is based on a poem that I have of the same title. And to see the standing ovation and how people received those words of hate is what grows when we forget to water our roots, the soil of our being, who was responsible for pulling the weeds, what happened to the village, and whose children are we raising? And does it matter if their skin contrasts with yours and if their melanin is different from ours? Hate is what grows in the absence of love. Love is what grows in the presence of action. Like, to have an entire room... It's not about the reception or how many people heard it in the sense of praise. It's that is a massive return on investment. Yeah. And not just the investment of the labor of the art, but the investment on the labor for myself. Yeah. To like sit down and actually put that feeling someplace, that the Coty who wrote that was responding to Black and brown bodies being harmed. The Coty who wrote that finished that text after the shooting in Texas with those young students in Uvalde. Like, that's where that came from. What happened to the village for those kids? And here we are in 2024 looking at what's happening to children all across this world. And that I was able to hear my own text back to empathize with somebody else. That's a massive return on investment. You must make art because you are alive. It doesn't matter about the salary. It doesn't matter about this. It doesn't matter how. You must, for your soul, create something because you are alive. Because everything else around us is pulling at our humanity and desensitizing us. And all I know, again, the part of me that moves at 1,000,000 miles per hour, that gets in front of a school, in front of a choir to teach, all of me shows up in the same room. And now I realize that when I allow music to do that for me again, and remember my voice, not just my singing voice, but my ability to write text, my ability to create music, my ability to sit down with you and have this conversation. It's in that vulnerability of creation. Look at how many other people are blessed by that. And of all the compliments and beautiful sentiments that I have gotten in the recent years, I got to sit with Out Loud Chorus and rehearse with them just this past Monday before they went to the conference. And I just had to do it. I had to hear it with my own ears. I was like, I don't have the strength to go to this thing, but I got to hear y'all sing this with my own ears. And one of the members came up to me and said, thank you for being brave enough to let us sing these words. And I was like, I just cried. Because that's what it is. That's what it is. And of all the texts that I've written, when I first heard them sing it, I thought to myself, wow, this feels young. Not weak, not dumb. Right? But the voice in which I wrote that text did feel like a younger version of me, at minimum, to speak to why hold grief, why hold pain, because it will come again. You know, the text I referenced earlier, that I wrote that before a series of other things would occur in my life. Right? But that Coty is still valid. And that Coty had a story to share. And I need to hear those lessons back from the vessel that I'm in.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes. And the message will continue to transform and like throughout a lifetime.
Yes.
And the beautiful thing is it will fall on different ears and mean something different to every person, right? Some people, it's going to stop them from starting a fight with someone at a bus stop.
Yeah.
For people, it's going to be what get them out of bed. Like for other people, it's going to be what gives them courage to perform if they're struggling with performance anxiety or insecurity.
Yes.
And it's so interesting that this song you almost didn't share because of imposter syndrome, right? And I feel like sometimes our greatest strengths are masked by these false beliefs and these lies that infiltrate, right? Because sometimes, I mean, I don't necessarily think that there are like, well, I do kind of feel like there are like good and bad energies in the world and you can tap into what you believe in. And I sometimes feel like that good, that light we all have in us, we all want to share it. And sometimes something, whatever, I don't know what word to use, but something wants to stop that. Something wants to get in the way of us sharing our brightest light and our strongest, most beautiful messages, all of us, right? And I think a lot of that thing, whatever, that is such a childish term, but that kind of other that stops us from being the fullest potential is that imposter syndrome. It's that thing that really kind of tells you you can't do it, you shouldn't do it, people won't respond well or like it or whatever, that inner critic, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever struggle with the inner critic? Is that something
100%.
that you
struggled with?
Oh yeah, I went to
Deal with it.
wine. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, seriously.
No, the here's the thing about the inner critic. Like that voice can come from, a series of dark places, but sometimes it can just come from the confinement of the environment that you're in, and that environment that was once supportive is now your cage. I saw a video where, it was actually a pastor who was using, his peers as a to emphasize a metaphor. Everyone was holding hands in a circle and he was standing in the middle. And he said, what growth looks like in a community is what happens when you're ready to move forward and your circle moves with you, and you move, and you can all move together. And it doesn't matter where you are on the circle, like everybody is moving, and that motion doesn't necessarily look forward, but like a spiral, it's like a circle that expands and like spins around a wheel. They said, but the minute you keep moving and your circle doesn't, your circle turns into a cage.
Yes.
And it was so simple.
Yeah.
It was so simple. I was like, holy smoke. That does not mean malice. That doesn't necessarily mean malice, and yet it's still a hindrance. I have a text called Dust that my colleague Ethan Sperry, who I work with at Portland State, he just said, and I was actually able to share it, at this summer camp, and it's been performed in a couple of different places. And Dust opens with, I am rubble. Carved into my ruins, you will find my ancestry interwoven with my identity. How much of me is made of their flesh? How much of me is carved from their bones? How much of me flows from their blood? The only way to my truth is through my foundation. I rage against those who would dare covet this sacred space. I am the temple and the monument. This is holy ground. I share part of that poem with you because there was a lot of conversation between myself and Ethan. Ethan, he's a grown man, right? I'm saying grown man. We're of different cultures, different backgrounds, different faith practices. And we kept talking with our students about the word rage. And his interpretation of rage was very different from my interpretation of rage. And when he would talk about it, I remember being in the room with him when he was saying, imagine that you're Coty and you're pushing against all these people who say that you can't do a thing, but that rage didn't feel like anger, which is a big thing with being a woman and how we express ourselves, let alone me being a woman of color, that I was like, no, y'all, we need to sit down with rage. Rage was not me pushing against haters who were like, oh, Coty, you can't do this, and who do you think you are? It was often me sitting down with people who loved me, who love me in the present. And we're so concerned because, let's come full circle, I did grow up in a lot of housing insecurity. I had lost my mother and my grandmother. There was a lot of grief in my family. I lived in all these different spaces. When you add all that stuff up and you look at a Coty who's deciding to blow up their whole life in a secure job where I was in Texas to follow this pipe dream of being a writer, to follow this pipe dream of maybe if I took a different job where instead of being in one classroom, I could find myself in a multitude of classrooms. And then maybe I could create art at a level that would amplify my energy in different places. That sounds crazy to people who've never done it themselves.
Right.
But to quote composer and wonderful educator, Professor Reginald Wright, and he's at Baylor University, Reggie said to me, Coty, you have to remember, people can only see you from their perspective in the ecosystem. It is not the pot's job to know how big the rose is going to grow. It's not the pot's job. It's to support you where you are in that moment of time.
Yeah.
But the plant doesn't cuss out the pot when it has to move. You just have to move.
Yeah.
And you put yourself in different soil. You move, you do the labor, you pull the weeds, you put yourself in different soil, and then you grow. Yes, there's imposter syndrome in that creation. There's also understanding that not everybody can see the fine print details of what you're meant to do. And if there is a God, if you believe in, the greater energy that combines us, at minimum, we owe it, as I read in the book Bittersweet, you owe it to the ancestors that left before you, that allowed you to be here, to try. You owe it to yourself to just try.
Yes.
Just try.
Yes.
When I get in front of my ensembles and I teach them a new thing, we raise our hand and we take 2 oaths. One of the oaths is that they know that I'm not the only smart person in the room. I'm gonna say that again. One of my students' oath, whether I'm teaching college or elementary or the church community choir with my older singers, my wise older singers, I say, let's raise our hand and remember that Coty Raven Morris is not the only smart person in the room. Yeah. You have a brain, you have an appearance, you have an opinion, you have life experiences that are guiding your choices. So if we just articulate those things, imagine what we could do together. All of those stories are born out of me trying to understand what we do in human nature. And that so much of what we do is, it's black or white, it's right or wrong. It's way more complex. Right. It's a myriad of colors. It's a myriad of experiences. Right. And what we have the ability to do, but we just move too fast to remember that we can do it, is we can take time to zoom in and look at all of that stuff and then figure out, okay, today I will grab boom, boom, and boom. You can't dissect it all in the same day, the same week, the same month, or even in this lifetime. That's part of the generational passing of the torch. Yes. But in this moment, in front of these people, I'm going to use this art to address this thing. Okay. And that's why I can even listen to my own text, let alone the songs or the pieces or the movies or the words or the tunes of other artists, of other creatives, of other people just being brave enough, vulnerable enough to express themselves. And in the body that I'm in now versus a year ago, a month ago, 10 years ago, I can hear it with a different lens, because that speaks to how I've moved in the soil in my life to be ready to hear a new message.
Yes.
that art reveals.
Oh, that's so beautiful. This is so inspiring. How do you actively honor your authentic musical voice?
I think one of the most essential things to honoring your voice and being authentic in the work that you're doing is respecting the process. When I think about some institutions that I've taught at, I'll just speak broadly, right? Yeah. You can get all the trophies all day, you can get all the accolades, you can get all the awards in the world, but then I think about how many students didn't go off to continue with music after, and that speaks to what the journey was to get to the accolade. Right. And when I think of my favorite moments as an educator, as a conductor in the classroom, yes, I remember the festival we went to, but I had a chamber choir of 24 high school students that would rehearse once a week on Thursdays from 6:30 to 8:30 at night. By the time they went to contest, they had only met exactly 25 times the entire school year. They pulled together a powerhouse varsity level performance in a month. Wow. In a month. The concert is not the thing that is fueling them to stay. It's rehearsal. They're showing up for rehearsal, because my rehearsals for this ensemble was made up of, we had dinner. We had dinner together from 6 to 6:30, and then we would rehearse and we would joke and we would talk and take the selfies and the pictures, and then we held ourselves to a standard because that time was so finite. And if that process was not made of that energy, then it would have just fallen on deaf ears. And they've had different experiences with different conductors because of how that was facilitated. Right. When I think about experiences that I have and opportunities I have to sing now, I am realizing in this body, yeah, that counts for you too. Like, yes, you're capable of showing up to a thing and sight reading a song or just doing the gig, but you love rehearsal. So it's essential that any of us, and however we create, understand the steps of how we create. At one point in time, I was in a writing workshop, and someone asked us, what is your writing process? How do you create a thing? And my first metaphor that I used was, it feels like I'm painting on a blank canvas, and I can envision the art in front of me, and then I just draw it. And then I sat with that for a while. I'm like, that's not true. It feels like I'm in a garden. And just like my backyard right now, I neglect it for a while, and then the weeds keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I have like a horror film Carrie moment, and I grab an axe and like, and then I go in the backyard and I whack all the things away. I'm like mad, and I pull all the things, and then I'm like, oh, I did it.
Yeah.
And then you start investing stuff, and then it's a little ugly for a while. You know, I got a song right now that like I'm proud of where it is, and then I woke up and listened to it, and I'm like, but you're not where you need to be. But I had to get those ideas here in order for you to be where you're gonna be, right? And so that the authenticity comes from understanding that my process does not look like the rest of my peers, that my piano chops are not like everybody else, but I've been writing jingles since I was a kid. I have voice memos on voice memos on voice memos and notes in my phone and on scraps of paper and like sticky notes that are just like segments of ideas. Right. And I just place them in places sometimes. And then I pass it. I have a dry erase board in my living room that I pass. And every blue moon, like I had a moment the other day, I got back in town and something had been sitting for a month. That's how long I was gone. And I looked at these 3 different sticky notes and I grabbed them and I put them side by side and I said, oh, this is one thought. But they came to me over the series of months. But this chord progression and this text and this text, oh, I was actually writing the draft of something, but I didn't know it. And part of my process is respecting that the lightning bolts of ideas that pop up with no context, they do have context. I just don't know what it is yet.
Yes.
And it will be revealed. And that's silly. I'm using a lot of words to just say that my creative process, the authenticity comes from play.
Yeah.
I grew up with PBS shows and Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street and the little dog. What was it? You remember with the redhead lady? It was like a little sheep.
A little sheepdog.
It was a little sheepdog.
Lamb chop?
Lamb chop. Little sheepdog.
Yeah.
It's a sock puppet is what it really is. But that way of education was the babysitter for me in some really troublesome times. Yeah. Where I got to escape into that world. And that's what art does for people. Yeah. And it still serves me. Yes. That's not to speak to the pain, though the pain is there. The grief was there. It also is to speak to the gift. Yes. The gratitude to those artists, those adults who their friends probably told them they were silly for wanting to get a sheepdog, a sock puppet, yeah. And get a little wishbone and teach kids, how to read and like that speaks volumes of all of us being brave enough to roll the dice that someone needs to hear this message through this vehicle, through this lens,
Yes. Amen. Oh, I could just talk to you all day, Coty.
I'm down. This is just part one.
I know. Seriously, let's please do a part 2
because
we only scratched like the surface of half of the questions I have for you.
My bad.
So how can people best get in touch with you? How can they find your poetry? How can they find your compositions? How can people get in touch with you?
Through prayer.
Yeah.
Click your heels 3 times and I'll just appear as a phantom.
You definitely have that vibe. People are like, you're a lot of people.
Just join me.
Great guardian angel.
Great guardian angel in your life. Feel free. I would love to connect with you. My website is myfullname.com. Coty Raven Morris. Okay. Make sure Coty's spelled with a T. The T is for totally awesome. Talent, tenacious. You know what I'm saying? CotyRavenMorris.com. My social medias, TikTok, Instagram, will be COTY Raven, Coty Raven. As far as my music, you can find my publications through jwpepper.com, Carl Fisher, Stanton, Briley.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, Coty was the finalist for the 2024 Music Educators Grammy, which is so incredible, and was just named a quarterfinalist for the 2025 Music Educator Grammy. And that is just giant congratulations. I can't think of another instructor at the moment that has earned that title more than you, especially after this conversation. Like, people like you need to be just cherished and honored, because your vulnerability, your strength, and your humanness combined with your talent is just so inspiring. And I really believe that people need more of you. So, yeah, amen. Well, it's true. And I really just want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to have a conversation with me on Artistry with Heart, and for sharing your wisdom with the world. You are such a gem.
Thank you, beautiful spirits.
Yeah, back at you.
Stop
beautiful spirit to beautiful spirit.
Connecting. Click your heel 3 times and Coty and Stephanie will be in your living room.
Yes, and I can't wait for people to hear the rest of who I want to be. It's just going to be so outstanding and gorgeous. Morris.
And I hope that you all listening enjoy it. And I look forward to hopefully being back and connect with you. Thank you for this platform and an opportunity to share, a snippet of my story. Thank you for listening to my tales today.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you for sharing. And I will put a link as well about your amazing nonprofit, Being Human Together, because I want to be a part of it. I want to learn more. We hope you'll stay tuned for future episodes like this one. Listeners out there, if you heard something that resonated with you or you want to hear more of it, make sure to download the journal prompt PDF directly related to Coty's episode that you can find in the show notes, or check out my website at stephaniebernards.org/inspiration. And here you can go a little bit deeper with some of the incredible insights that Coty shared with us today and your own personal artistry, because let's be honest, I hope that's why you're here. That's all for now. Until next time, be you and stay inspired.
Coty actually shared a little of her original piece, Who I Want to Be, on our holiday episode, featuring her nonprofit, Being Human Together. This version of Who I Want to Be was recorded at the Bent But Not Broken 3.0 conference hosted by Elevate Vocal Arts.
I lead with my spirit, keeping love in a circle around me, expressing my spirit, loving what I can see and cannot see. I take care of the vessel I'm in. I love the me that's under this skin, taking care of my mind, envisioning the me I want to be. Keeping love in a circle around me, expressing my spirit, loving what I can see and cannot see. I take care of the vessel I'm in. I love the me that's under the skin, taking care of my mind, envisioning the me I want to be. I live with my spirit, urban love in a circle around me, expressing my spirit, loving what I can see and cannot see. I take care of the vessel I'm in. I love me that is under this skin, taking care of my mind, envisioning the me I want to be.
My sensitivity is my beauty. No one can tell you what you want to be. My mistakes make me strong.
Joy is my garden.
Pain is my teacher.
It is okay not to be perfect.
Sorrow makes space for joy.
Being different is okay.
Love is growth.
I am human and I am allowed to be human.
My scars prove that I survived. No one can be perfect.
Just because you failed in one thing does not mean you failed in other.
I am my sword and my shield.
I am at peace with my past. My voice is my strength. I am enough.
Taking care of my mind, envisioning the me I want to be.